Okay, so we'll go into a whole explanation about how we got into this particular situation here in a few minutes, but before we go that far, I gotta tone down some of the bling on this thing. But I wanted you to see the before I do a little bit of work to it. It's a nice truck. It's a super duper nice truck. But anyway, I'm gonna de-bling this thing a little bit, kind of tone her down, make her a little more inconspicuous, and we'll get back to you here in an hour or so. Okay, so it was a little bit more than an hour. I got into a little project that I wasn't expecting. It wasn't any big deal. It was just it was an electrical gremlin, and it was frustrating me. But I got it taken care of. So anyway, we're gonna backtrack before I get into this particular truck. We're gonna backtrack to that 8.1 I was telling you about. And we're gonna do this inside here because it's a little breezy outside and I don't want the wind noise and yada yada yada, so we'll just do it in here. So anyway, that 8.1, that 03 3/4 ton long bed crew cab, dark blue. I can't remember. I never did look to see what size rims and tires it had on it, but it had oversized rims and tires, but they were done tastefully. They looked good on the truck, but it picked the truck up a little more. It did not have a lift kit. It was just the bigger tires and everything just made it stand up a little more. Wanted $24,000 for it. So I called the dealer. They gave me, actually talked to two different salesmen on 2 different days because, well, the first time I called, I got one of their service guys. He could not get a hold of any of the sales guys, so he gave him my number. One of the sales guys called me back the next day. Gave me his spiel about it, told me how great of a truck it was. They took it in on trade. It spent most of its life down in Florida, moved up here. When the guy traded it in on a new truck, he didn't even want to drive it in. It was such a nice truck because it was snowing. He yada yada yada, gave me the whole spiel about how great it was. And then the next day, the guy that actually took the truck in on trade, that salesman, he called me, gave me the same spiel, how great it was. Low mileage, great truck. You're gonna look long and hard to find one any better. All right, I'm kind of interested in this truck. I know knew I was getting a job closer to home, so the 8.1, the gas mileage didn't really bother me any. It was gonna be a good pulling truck. I figured with an 8.1 and the Allison in it, that would be a good 3/4 ton to throw a gooseneck hitch in. Not that a 6.0 is. I would pull a gooseneck with a 6.0. I just would not pull our 38 footer with a 6.0. I'd pull like a 25 footer. Which we do not have, so at this point, there's no point in throwing a gooseneck hitch in it. It might happen one of these days, but I'm going to have to buy a different trailer in order for that to happen. So anyway, I go down there, look at that 8.1. It was right down here in Elkhart, so it took me like 35 minutes to get down there. It wasn't that big of a deal. Well, one of the things that they had told me was they were putting a power steering pump in it because they knew when they took it in on trade, the power steering pump was bad. Well, they made me an appointment to come down there, and I wanted to make sure I got there a little early just in case. Well, when I pulled in there, they were just taking it out for their test drive after putting the new power steering pump on it. So I wanted to make sure they weren't doing anything shady or anything like that. That's why I showed up early, because I wanted to see what was going on with the truck. I'm gonna tell you what, we're just gonna bear with me. I'm tired of holding the camera. We're gonna set you up right there, and I'm gonna grab me a stool real quick. And we're gonna do this because it makes my life a little easier. There, that should work. So anyway, I'm down there looking at this truck, and I pull in, park. Hold on, I got a little yellow devil. Come in, pup. So I get out of the truck. They didn't even drive that 8.1 that far. They took it around their car lot and then brought it back in the shop. And they pulled it in the shop just as I was getting out of the truck. And I walk in, talk to the salesman. He says, "Yeah, we just got done putting a power steering pump on it. We can go out and look at it. You can take it for a test drive." All right, sweet. It's a sharp looking truck. It's a really, really dark blue. It almost looked black until you got up to it, and then you could tell it was blue. It was a really, really sharp truck. So we walk into their shop there, and the guys are just finishing up putting everything back together. And he opens the driver's side. Well, first thing I noticed is because they pulled it in nose first, and we walked in the door, and I was looking at the back of it. Tailgate was all scratched to hell, and it had a big dent in it. I mean, it wasn't like a nice smooth dent where you could get a suction cup puller and pop it back out. It was like something, they hit it with something sharp. And it didn't puncture, but it had a really sharp dent in it, so it's not even one you could pull out because the metal was deformed, like they hit it with a point. Alright, well, there's a point against it. Mind you, this truck was clean as hell. You're never going to find another one like it. Alright. So the salesman walks around, he says, let me pull it out here, we'll take it for a test drive. He opens the door up, and on the GMs, you got that plastic trim piece along the driver's seat that's got your rocker switches and everything for your seat, your power seat. That plastic is all busted to hell, and it's hanging down, it's hanging like that far off the side of the seat, hanging down. Like, alright, and then the side of the seat's all tore up from sliding in and out of it, and the back of the seat's all cracked. It had the pleather, not real leather, the pleather interior, which they told me it had cloth, which is part of the reason I got excited about it, because everybody gets excited about the vinyl, pleather, whatever the hell it is, interior. I prefer cloth because we're in Michigan. Them vinyl seats, they get cold. I'd rather have a cloth seat. Well, they told me it was cloth. I got there, it was vinyl, or whatever the hell you call that. So, that was the first thing I noticed, and he was getting in, so I couldn't really see any further into the truck than the seat, but the driver's seat was all tore to hell. It had an aftermarket exhaust on it, and she was throaty. It did sound good, it ran good, the engine was solid, the transmission was solid. But anyway, he pulls it out, and he takes my driver's license, and he puts a plate in it, and I go take it for a test drive, and the other thing that threw me off was it was so low on fuel, the gas light was on, which on an 8.1, once the gas light's on, you don't have very long, so I didn't get to take it for a very long test drive. But I took it out and pulled out, and there's a 2-lane highway there, and I barely get this thing over like 20 mile an hour, and the steering wheel's doing this. I'm like, what the hell? Mind you, also, that power steering pump, granted, they just got done changing it, but they had drove it long enough, the air should have worked out of it. The power steering, even with that new pump, was still really, really heavy, and that pump whined like hell. And it was just all over. I was scared. I got it up to 40 mile an hour, and I was so scared I quit getting into it. So I took it, probably about 2.5 miles down, and there's an intersection where I could turn around, and I brought it back. And I pull it in there, and before I walk back in and talk to the salesman, I had to start looking it over. The plastic piece that covers your door pillar on the passenger side was broke, and it was hanging loose. The headliner, it was clearly a smoker truck because the headliner had a bunch of stains in it. The interior smelled kind of off. The passenger seat was all tore up just like the driver's seat. All of the buttons on the radio, when GM does that, those buttons are actually clear, and they layer a black plastic over it that's got the numbers and letters and everything in it, so you know what the buttons are. All that black was off of it, and it was just a bunch of clear buttons, so unless you knew in your head what the radio functions were, you didn't know what any of the buttons did. Being a Florida truck, the dash wasn't cracked, but it was I felt it, and it just did not feel like plastic anymore. You could tell it was getting kind of brittle. Now she wants out. So right above me, I looked up, and there was a burn mark in the headliner. I'm guessing that somebody flicked a cigarette and ash went up or something and burnt it. So the interior of this truck was, I don't want to say it was garbage because I've seen worse, but the interior of that truck left a lot to be desired, like a lot. So then I get out and I start looking over it, and the box on it the box itself is immaculate. There's no rust in the fenders. The box was perfect. There was no rust in the fenders. The fenders were perfect. There was no rust in either of the bumpers, which was the thing on that body style. The bumpers were perfect. Mind you, they told me there was no rust in this truck whatsoever, so I look down and I start looking at the rockers, and under the suicide doors was fine, but under the driver and passenger side, we were always getting in and out. The rockers were bubbling terrible. I mean, like, they were one step away from you could start putting your finger through the rockers. So the rockers were rusty. And then I got to looking at the driver's side front tire, and it was like somebody took a Stanley knife and went all the way around it and started slitting the tread off. And the tires wore real funny too. They were all fretted on the outside, which you would expect off of a lifted truck, but not off of a just truck that just had bigger tires and rims. And I could tell that they had never rotated the tires because the back tires were still wore square. So the driver's side front tire and the passenger side wore funny. It didn't have any of the cuts in it, but the driver's side front tire was not even safe to have on the road because that thing would have separated and blown up and you would have had a bad day. So anyway, sorry this is getting to be a long story, but this 8-1 really, not necessarily the truck, the salesman just really pissed me off. I was so hot when I left that place. So we walk in there and he starts giving me his sales pitch again. He's like, so what do you think of the truck? And I'm like, well, it was described to me as a mint truck. I'd look long and hard to find it, and I started listing off all the stuff I found wrong with the interior, and I started listing off all the stuff that I heard. I told him about that front tire, and basically he started blowing everything I said. He just started blowing it all off. He's like, it's an 8-1 with an Allison in it, and it's a 3/4 ton. That's a rare combination. You're going to have a really hard time finding another truck like that. And I was like, yeah, but that motor and that transmission can be perfect. If the rest of the truck that's around it, shit, the motor and the transmission ain't worth squat. She's like, well, I'll knock $1,500 off and I'll put a new set of tires on it. So we're still at $23,000 for this truck. And it is far, I mean, I'd have probably had to bring it home and put the interior back the way I wanted it. I'd probably be looking at least $1,000 to $1,500 for the plastic pieces that were broke and to fix the seats or replace the seats, whatever I would ended up having to do. And just, I was like, I gotta think about this. At this point, I was no longer interested in the truck. If not only because the truck was not what it was described to me as, but because he was being a complete and utter jackass and everything. Like, I mentioned the interior parts. He says, you're really going to let a couple pieces of plastic keep you from buying this rare truck? I was like, yep. So I told him I got to think about it. I was going to come home and talk to Dad about it, see what he thought. He tried to get me to drive the truck. What was it? It was 33 miles from there to here. I didn't want to drive it 3 miles with that front tire the way it was, and it drove like shit. I mean, when I say it drove like shit, it drove like shit. So I said, no, I'm just going to go home and talk to Dad, see what he thinks about it. He's like, okay, I'll call you tomorrow. So, mind you, I went in there and looked at it Thursday afternoon before work. Well, I walk out the door, and the truck's still sitting there, and I walk past the front of it, and I notice the front tires are doing this. Like, they're tipped in on top. Which is completely contrary to the way the front tires are worn. And I even talked to Dad about it, the way these independent front suspension Chevys work, because I backed into the spot I was in, and they will tip in just a little bit because of the way the toe is. They'll tip in a little bit when you back up, but, I mean, you could look at it, and it was tipped in far enough. There were some fairly wide tires, and they were tipped in far enough that they were picking the outsides of the tires up off the ground. I was like, holy shit. So either A, the toe-in on that thing was just set way too damn aggressive, and that's what was fretting the outsides of the front tires so bad, and that's why the steering wheel was fighting so bad, was it was trying to do this to fight that toe-in, or every ball joint, tie rod end, everything in that front end was junk. And if it came down to everything in the front end being junk, because the way it was fretting them tires and the way it was fighting me, I wouldn't have been in there piecemealing at a ball joint here. I would have took that to a shop and said, if it's a joint and it's greasable in the front of that thing, replace it. And if you go in and do that, you're looking at somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 just in front end parts to bring one of these back up to snuff. So you have that to consider too. So anyway, he calls me the next day, and I tell him I'm not interested in a truck, and I could tell he was pissed off about I could tell he was pissed with me when I left because I was I was picking this truck apart effortlessly right in front of him, and I could tell he did not like that because I think he thought I was going to come in and be a sucker or some stupid kid that just saw a big old fucking truck and thought, oh yeah, I need this. I've been around enough of these trucks to know what to look for on them. So, needless to say, I did not buy the 8.1. Had no interest in it. It was a solid $1,200 to $1,500 truck, and you'd have probably put another 6 to 7 in it to make it a nice, what they described to me as a nice truck. The only thing it had going for it was the 8.1, the Allison, and the body was fairly solid. But you had to find a tailgate. You'd had to have the rockers fixed. I mean, you could have fixed the tailgate, but you had to put Bondo in it. And at that point, just buy a different tailgate. I didn't even, once I saw that, I didn't even fill the tailgate down to see if it was rusted out in the bottom. But anyhow. So, that's how Friday started. And then after I made that phone call, I got another phone call from the insurance company. Got the settlement on my GMC. And then I came over here and started working in the shop because my plan was to take the white over to my house, and Dad and I were going to drop those trees that I was telling you about. I was going to run the white over there to cable them down, but I had 2 hydraulic lines to replace because the crimps on the hoses were weeping. So I started tearing into that, and then my buddy Matt texted me, and it's a Facebook ad with this truck in it. Mind you, this all happened within a span of like 2 hours. I told him no on that 8.1. I got the settlement on my GMC, and then this thing got shown to me. And I'm looking at the pictures. It's like, holy shit! And the description on it. I mean, this guy spared no. I'm gonna read you the description of the truck. Give me 1 second here to find it. Dum dum dum. 2002 Chevy 2500 HD, extended cab, long bed, 132,167 miles, 6.0 gas, automatic transmission, power windows, door locks, towing package with brake controller. Interior has Covercraft seat covers. Those are not cheap seat covers either, by the way. WeatherTech floor liners. It's got the full one-piece one in the back, driver's, passenger, full set of WeatherTech floor liners. Those are not cheap. Exterior, new aftermarket tow mirrors. Those are brand new mirrors. Tires have less than 10,000 miles. They're Goodyear Destination ATs. Those are not Goodyear. Firestone Destination ATs. Those are good tires. On rims, so I bet between just the tires and the rims, I bet you're looking at somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 in tires and rims on this thing. Eagle alloy rims. Has not been driven in winter in years. We'll get to that here in a minute. No rust on rockers. That is true. There's not a speck of rust in this cab or this bed, or that there is no rust on this truck. Okay, that's a lie. It's doing the typical GM gas cap door has got a rust bubble in it, but that's easy to fix. The main body parts on this truck, other than that right there is no rust on this truck whatsoever. You swear to God it was a Southern truck and it came out of Ohio. List of new parts: brake lines, intake gasket, water pump, upper and lower radiator hoses, new battery, and it's an interstate battery, so that's not a cheap battery. In October 2021, AC full service. I think they replaced some AC lines. They recharged the pump, whole 9 yards. Fluids were changed front to rear less than 200 or 2,000 miles ago. She showed me the receipt. The last time they had this service, because it was always dealer service, the last time they had it serviced, there was $800 just in fluids. Nothing else, just fluids, $800. Truck has 20% tint all the way around. They had brow tint on the windshield because of Ohio, the way the Ohio laws work. You can't have tint in your line of vision, so it was tinted in the top third, the bottom third, and then the center was just, and it looked weird. So I pulled that tint off, but I had to take it off anyway because the state of Michigan, you're not allowed to have any tint on your windshield. They don't normally bother you about it, but all it takes is for a cop to be having a bad day, and I took the tint off. Truck has they bought the truck in June of 2015 from the original owner with 117,000 miles on it. And last year, they only put just a tick under 3,000 miles on it. And he said they averaged about 4,000 miles a year since they've owned it. So the thing's hardly been driven since they owned it. So, the original owner was a cop. They said he drove it in the winter for about 2 years, but he had his police cruiser. So he said after that, it never got driven in the winter. So it's only ever seen winter 2 years in its life. And at that, it wasn't very much because he always had a cruiser. And then, like I say, after he just never drove it in the winter. So it hasn't seen winter since it was 2 years old. We'll take you around it here. So I already listed off everything it's got. It's got the step bars. Obviously, it's got, those are different door handles because they would not have been chrome in the factory. It's got the chrome. Actually, these are probably stainless, polished stainless, I'd have to guess. But it's got the stainless rail covers. It had a bed liner in it, but my bed liner's thicker. And it fits a little better, so I put my bed liner in it. But I had a brand new bed liner in it. This is how anal these guys were about their maintenance. They had a DMI cushion hitch, a frame mount DMI cushion hitch on it. So they took the factory hitch off. Well, obviously they wanted the hitch back to put on the truck that they're replacing this one with. This is how anal they were. They cleaned up and painted the factory hitch and then bought brand new factory GM bolts to mount the hitch back on. That's the kind of guys these are. But obviously the nice thing about this is it's the same. My GMC was an 02. This one's an 02. So my Class 5 Kurt hitch that I just bought last spring to put on my GMC fit this one. So obviously I put my hitch on this one, got rid of that junk GMC one. It's got the aftermarket mud flaps on it with the Chevy emblem on it. I'm going to take this tip off. I keep forgetting. Your truck is supposed to be an expression of you. They had this thing chromed out, had all the chicken lights on it and everything. That's the way they liked it. I'm not going to fault them for that. It's just not my spot, not my style. I'm not that flashy, so I took most of that off. I do like the chrome rocker covers here, or chip guard here. I do like those. They had a strobe light on it that was wired in off the auxiliary. It's just a mag mount strobe light. I took that off for now, but Dad actually brought up a pretty valid point that would be handy if we're ever moving equipment in the dark. And they just had it. There's actually a factory harness that comes back here to hook up auxiliary lighting. It works off a factory switch in the dash. And all they did was they had that mag mount up there, and then they ran the cord down under the foam insulator for the cab light there. And they had it wire nutted. Well, what I'm going to do to make it a little bit more quick change is I'm going to get a 2-prong plug to put on there so that in the spring and fall or remove the equipment at dark, I can throw that back on there. And just for a little extra safety. But anyway, it's got the window flares. Those are not cheap. Those are like 65, 70 bucks a door or something like that. You got to see the engine bay on this thing. I've never seen an engine bay on a GM truck this clean. Not this old, anyhow. I mean, look at the interior. There's like the rockers. There's not a chip. This truck is immaculate. The seats under these covers look like brand new. I mean, obviously, it's gonna be nice because you know they're teeter covers. You can't get the seat dirty anymore. But I mean, just look at this truck. I can't believe I found this thing in the Midwest. It's almost stupid how clean it is. The doors are solid. I cannot describe how nice this truck is. The only thing I've found that does not work is the left-right adjustment on the power mirrors. And apparently, I had two 20-minute conversations with the phone on this guy, and he told me everything he could remember about the truck. When I got there, they took me all over everything that they had done and or knew about. The only thing that I found that doesn't work that they did not tell me about, like I say, is the left-right mirror adjust on that rocker switch, and I'm guessing they didn't know about it because once you get your mirrors set, how often do you adjust them? And I'm guessing that it's a thing with these GM switches, because when I got my GMC, I had to replace that switch because it was the same way. The up-down worked, the left-right did not. So, but it's like a $35 or $40 switch, and it's 2 minutes to replace it. You pop that cover off, it snaps in, you're good to go. But anyway, check out this engine bay. This thing is nuts. Like, look how clean this is. It's crazy. They said it uses no oil. They said it uses no coolant. It's like the most honest, solid, closest thing you're going to get to a brand new 2002 that you will probably ever see in your life. They replaced the fog lights. I'm probably going to end up having to get a new wind guard for the bottom, because they had chicken lights down in here, and I took those out. Mainly because it was going to look stupid, because 2 of them were going to be covered up by the license plate. So, but those are all here. What else can I tell you about it? The only thing that I cannot take off is it had a 2-way radio in it. And when they put the 2-way radio in, there's actually a hole in the roof for the antenna, so I can't take that off. It obviously did not come with the 2-way radio. They still had the power harness in there, and obviously the antenna cable still there. I took the power harness out. There's no sense in me putting the 2-way radio in it, because the vast majority of the time I'm by myself, and what am I going to do? Talk to myself on a 2-way radio? But it's exactly what I wanted. It's a 1.5 cab long bed, which anything I was finding around here, everybody makes it sound like it's super duper hard to find rust-free trucks in the Midwest. It's not. There is plenty of rust-free trucks or very, very low rust trucks on Facebook right now. The problem is, in all the 3/4 tons, if you find a crew cab or a 1.5 cab, they're all the damn 6.5 foot box. And I don't know who the hell in their right mind would want a 6.5 foot box on a 3/4 ton, because it is useless. You put a toolbox in there, all of a sudden you got a 4-foot bed. And if you put a toolbox and an L tank in there, all of a sudden you got a 3-foot bed. It's like, why do you want a short box on a 3/4 ton? If you're using it for a grocery getter, get a 1/2 ton. It'll bring the price of the 3/4 tons down for the rest of us. But like I say, it's the exact, almost the exact twin to my GMC. The only difference is my GMC was the SLE, which is obviously the GM option package. This one is an LS and the Chevy option package, I think to match an SLE and a GM would be an LST, I think. But basically the only difference is there would be a couple more options on the climate control. It would have, my other truck had the heated rear window for the defroster, and my other truck had power seats, and this one's got manual seats. It's just got the regular rear window, and it's got like 2 less options up here on the climate control, but it's still power locks, power windows, all that bull crap. So I'm happy. Same color, same arrangement. It's ironic how I ended up with the exact same truck. Basically, it's just a Chevy instead of a GMC. But they obviously, I took all this off. They had these stainless grill inserts. Like I say, it's just, if that's what made them happy, great. If those guys took this good care of a truck, they can do whatever they want to it. I'm not going to judge them for it. But like I say, it's just a little bit more flashier than my lifestyle. They had this chrome bug guard. I took that off. The chrome gas door cover, I took that off. These corner markers, I'm actually going to take Matt, because Matt and I were talking about it before I went down there and looked at it, and he brought up the idea, and at first I was like kind of mad, but the more I thought about it, the more I was like, that's not a bad idea. I think I'm going to put these corner lights on my grain truck. And these they had down under the bed, clamped to the rockers. They didn't, that's how good they are, they didn't want to drill through the rockers and chip the paint so it would rust, so they made those, and they had them on there with beam clamps. And they actually look good. And I was going to leave them on there, But I started taking stuff off, and I accidentally clipped the wires to them, which I'm glad I did, because that gets into the project that I ran into real quick. But I also noticed the way they had them clamped on there, they'd be kind of a salt catch. So I'm going to keep them because they're probably going to go back on there. My goal is, if everything goes good this fall, I'll try to find like a 90s half ton as a daily, so I can keep this thing off the road in the winter, if at all possible. Because I can't, I almost didn't want to buy it, not because of price or because I didn't like the truck. It's because I knew I couldn't give it as good of a home as they did. Like, this thing always sat inside. It's always been detailed. Like, if you'd seen these guys operate, I was drooling over their shop, and they had a 7240 Magnum sitting in there. I was drooling over that, and like, some of the coolest, nicest guys we've ever met in our life. His mom, dad, and I made a day of it. We went down there, and I bet we sat there or stood there in their shop and shot the shit with them for a better part of 2.5 to 3 hours. This great bunch of guys. It was a father, 2 sons, and then the old man showed up, and there was one other old guy there that I don't know how he fit in, but like, funny as hell. Just, I feel like they would be an awesome group of guys to hang out with. I wish I lived closer, because I'd love to go down there and talk to them again. They were an amazing group of guys to talk to. I cannot even begin to describe. Actually, this came from Dart County, Ohio, which any of you guys know, watch Mike Less. It's where he's from. Actually, the exact name of the town was Arcanum, Ohio. And once they said Dart County, I was like, we are in Dart County. He said, yeah. It's like, you know Mike Less? He said, yeah, he's one of our neighbors. Now, down there, their farms are spread out enough. I don't know how close a neighbor actually is, but they knew him, and he's actually got video of that 7240 Magnum with their bean planter planting beans on Mike Less's channel. And they know they're somehow shirt-tail relation through marriage. They're related to Andy Dietweiler, which is a harmless farmer, which he was only, I think they said he was only like 40 or so miles away from him. So it's kind of strange how that all worked out. They knew 2 pretty famous guys. So anyway, I would give their farm name, but that's kind of, I'm not gonna say names or anything, but they're from Arcanum, Ohio. They run all red equipment. Great bunch of guys. I really wish one day I'd like to go back down there and shoot the shit with them again, just for shits and giggles, because they were a great bunch of guys. But anyway, back to these. The way they had them on there, I was scared that they were going to be kind of a salt catch, just because they were clamped, and this edge was clamped up against the edge of the rocker. I was worried moisture was going to get in there and start rust on the rockers, so I took them off. I'm going to keep them because if I can keep this thing off the road in the winter, I'd really like to put them back on, because they did look sharp. So yeah. Anyway, one of the issues I ran into is they had all those marker lights tied into the turn signals and the running lights, and they basically just cut the wires, had a butt splice in the main harness, and then they had the power wire, and they had wires incoming from the truck harness, and those wires tied into one side of the butt splice, and then the other side of the butt splice was just the single outgoing wires coming to the lights in here. Well, when I cut those apart, apparently I disturbed something in that butt splice and pulled one of the wires out, and it was making the passenger side turn signal do all sorts of funny shit. It was really hard to diagnose the problem, and eventually, after like 30 minutes of swapping parts and tracing crap, I figured out what I had done. And so I ended up pulling the butt splices apart and putting new heat shrink butt splices. But I think what eventually I'm going to do is, these are just little short stub harnesses. They're like 12 inches long, and they got all 3 of your plugs for your lights. And then they all go into a main plug that's a snap plug that's clamped to the side of the radiator core support. I'm probably just going to see how much it costs to get brand new harnesses without the butt splices in them. That way we don't have any future corrosion issues. So yeah, I guess I really, I still got to put, oh, this is the other nice thing about it being a farm truck. They already had it, they had a L tank and everything already in it, so it's already got the wires pulled back here. The only thing I got to do to make it live is replace a fuse that they pulled out to kill the power back here. So I got a harness, I might as well buy a fill-right pump for my tank and get rid of that crank pump. So, and that's kind of handy. But that's all I got left to do to it, is put my L tank in here, my toolbox. I got an appointment Wednesday to get the title and plate transferred. Monday I'm going to call on insurance. I'm not going to drive it to work tonight until I at least get the insurance transferred fully over. I'm technically on my policy supposed to be covered for 15 days without transferring the policy to this truck, but I would just rather get the policy transferred to this truck before I put it on the road. So I'm going to drive the 1 ton for one more night. So yeah, everything in less than a week, or a week and a day, 8 days. Went from wrecking a truck, totaling a truck, to getting my insurance settlement, to having the basically the exact same truck. So apparently everything is working out like it's supposed to. The one thing that I'm really contemplating doing, just because the guy pissed me off so bad, is I'm really contemplating driving this thing down to the dealer where that 8.1 is, pulling it up in front of the showroom doors, walking in there, getting the guy's attention and saying, hey, next time you tell somebody that you have a cherry fucking truck, it better look like that one. Because I cannot describe to you. I'm probably down talking it a little too much because of how pissed off I was, but it was far from the cherry truck that they described to me over the phone. This thing is exactly, it was actually like, I would say more than what they described to me over the phone. Like they detailed it before I showed up. They changed the oil in it the morning before we went down and looked at it yesterday, Saturday morning. They changed the oil in it yesterday morning before we got there, so it's got fresh oil change in it. Like, it was like dealer service from it. Like I cannot describe to you how awesome them guys were. I would buy anything from them any day of the week in a heartbeat, no questions asked. So yeah. But anyway, like I say, I don't really know what else to tell you. It's like, just even if it was just like, say, in today's market, figure $12,000 truck, between the aftermarket rims, the brand new tires, these WeatherTech floor liners, these seat covers, because they're like a Carhartt type material, all the parts that they had put on the engine, the brake lines, all that crap, I'll bet they have close to $4,500 to $5,000 in parts and fluids and accessories. And so, I mean, I had to pay more for it than what I was hoping to pay for a truck. I had budgeted myself X amount of dollars, and then when I got my insurance settlement, it made it a whole lot easier to buy this thing. That kind of helped push me over the edge on pulling the trigger. But when they started telling me everything that they had done to it, when they started telling me the condition of the truck, it was like, yeah, it's more money than I wanted to spend, but you can't find trucks like this. Like, even if you went down and bought a Southern truck, the paint would probably be faded and have a bazillion miles on it, because that's the flip side of buying a Southern truck, at least in any case I've seen, is up here, the body falls off before the powertrain's wore out. Well, down there they don't have any rust, so they run the wheels off of them. The powertrain's junk, but the body's still good. So it's like a double-edged sword. So, yeah. So I guess I don't know what else to tell you about it. I mean, she pretty much speaks for herself. That's like the most honest truck you'll ever find in your life. And I only had to drive 160 miles to get it. So, I'm sure you got enough of me talking for one day, and this is already, holy shit, a 40-minute video. So, I guess things are getting back to normal around here. So, that's it for this one. We'll catch you guys on the next one.